uncle, Robert, spent half his life working as a taxi driver. Even now, though he's retired, he still goes out for night shifts from time to time. He genuinely loves the job, partly because it lets him meet all kinds of people. And the stories he's collected over the years, he could write a whole book. Some of them are especially strange, almost impossible to explain logically. This is one of those stories. Maybe someone listening can figure out what he actually encountered that night. He was working the night shift. Sometime after 2 a.m., he received a call. He was glad. Nights like that are usually quiet. Probably another drunk, I'll have to drive home, he thought. He pulled up to the address, a 9-story apartment building downtown, and noticed someone pacing back and forth near the entrance. Before Robert could even stop the car, the man jumped inside. Turned out, that was his passenger. He sat in the front seat, next to the driver, which was unusual. Most people sit in the back. Right away, Robert noticed how nervous the man was. His hands were shaking, sweat glistened on his forehead. He repeated the destination in a rush, even though it was already clearly listed in the app, and added, "Please hurry, I'm in a big rush." He must be on something, Robert thought at first. But no, maybe not. Hard to tell. He didn't look like a typical night passenger at all. A wrinkled raincoat, thin glasses, a bald head shining with sweat. Like he'd been running. He looked more like a bank clerk who stayed late at work. Well, a ride is a ride. Robert started pulling out of the courtyard when something strange caught his attention. A pedestrian was crossing the street, dressed in a dark cloak with a hood, holding something like a cane. He walked slowly, confidently, like the place belonged to him, and Robert was driving through his territory. The stranger crossed the street and headed straight toward their car. The passenger hadn't noticed him at first. He was looking the other way. Then he turned his head, saw him, and suddenly screamed, "Step on it, go now, don't stop, faster." Robert later said the fear in the man's voice was so desperate that his own hair practically stood on end. A deep, bone-chilling dread washed over him. He hit the gas, fast enough to calm the passenger and himself, and pulled out onto the street. The pedestrian was left far behind. They drove in silence. Robert had a rule. If the passenger doesn't talk, neither does he. The man was trembling like a leaf, constantly running prayer beads through his fingers. Then Robert heard quiet muttering, too soft to make out the words. It sounded like either a prayer or some kind of chant. That's when Robert really started feeling uneasy. He kept glancing at the navigation, thinking how badly he wanted this ride to end. At an intersection, he stopped at a red light. The streets were empty, but still. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something. He turned his head and froze. About 60 feet ahead, walking slowly and confidently, was the same cloaked figure. This time, the fear hit Robert so hard that he pressed the gas without waiting for the green light. The passenger saw the pedestrian too, and started moving the beads even faster, muttering louder. "How did he get here?" Robert finally blurted out. "Even by car, that's impossible. Do you know him?" The passenger tried to answer, but he was shaking so badly that nothing understandable came out. Robert glanced at him and stopped asking questions. The man's face was ghostly pale, like all the blood had drained from it. His eyes looked like those of a trapped animal. The passenger wiped sweat from his forehead, glanced around nervously, and pleaded, "Please, if you can, don't stop at traffic lights. Robert was usually strict about following the rules, but this time he didn't even consider arguing. He pushed the accelerator, slowing down only near speed cameras. Thankfully, the road was almost empty. Finally, they arrived. The destination turned out to be an administrative building, completely dark, no lights in the windows, clearly abandoned for the night. "You sure this is the place?" Robert asked. Yes, this one," the passenger stammered. He opened the door, looked around anxiously, shoved a large bill into Robert's hand without even checking the change, and ran toward the building. Robert didn't drive off right away. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to watch for a moment. The passenger reached a service entrance, glanced around fearfully, unlocked the door with a key, and slipped inside. A minute passed, but no lights came on in the building. "What am I doing?" Robert muttered and started the engine. He turned the car around and began to pull away, when suddenly he broke into a cold sweat. The hair on his head practically stood straight up. Right in front of his car stood the figure in the dark cloak. It was the same pedestrian with the cane. How could he possibly have covered the distance Robert had driven in 20 minutes? Robert slammed on the brakes. For a brief moment, the headlights illuminated the stranger's face, perfect features, a satisfied smirk, and his eyes. They were glowing red, not reflecting light like an animal's eyes. They burned as if lit from within. Terrified beyond reason, Robert swerved around him and sped onto the road. In the rearview mirror, he saw the stranger calmly twirling the cane from one hand to the other as he walked toward the building where the passenger had disappeared. That's when pure animal terror took over. Every instinct screamed, "Get out of here now!" And he did. He floored the gas so hard he nearly lost control. That night, he didn't take another fare. He drove straight home, drank every bottle of vodka he could find, and only then managed to fall asleep. The next morning, he heard the news. A massive fire had destroyed a warehouse complex and the adjacent administrative building. Robert didn't doubt it, but he checked the address anyway. It was the same one. He followed the reports, asked around, tried to find out what caused the fire. Nothing. Someone was blamed. The case was quietly closed. To this day, Robert can't explain what happened that night. It remains the strangest and most terrifying experience of his entire career. Many years have passed, but remembering that night still sends chills down his spine. Ruth took a long drag from her last cigarette before her shift, as if she wanted to inhale the remnants of the weekend along with the smoke. The depot was quiet. Saturday evening shifts were always the calmest. Few people around, the supervisors at home, and if lucky, she could gossip with the girls in dispatch. Not lucky tonight. The girls had already scattered, leaving only a thermos of cold tea and half a jar of strawberry jam. Thanks to Claire, who didn't forget. "Ruth, you're on the 7 tonight," shouted Sam, the mechanic, leaning halfway out of the window. "Be careful, the wires on Elm Street are acting up." Ruth waved, signaling she understood, and climbed into her trolleybus. 7 it was. A route like any route, from the park, through downtown, to Factory Street, then back. 40 minutes there, 40 back, then home. To continue a dream about a vacation in the mountains that had been haunting her for 3 nights, never quite finishing. The evening city greeted her with sparse lights and empty streets. 3 passengers in the bus, an elderly woman with shopping bags, a sleeping drunk, and a girl with a book. Ruth turned the heater up. October had been unusually damp and chilly, and rolled along, wondering if she could make it to the market for potatoes tomorrow. Payday was still a week away, and besides Claire's jam, her fridge was empty. At the theatre stop, the drunk was thrown off by inspectors. No ticket. The girl got off near the library. The old lady rode to the final stop, slowly unloading her bags, muttering about young people today. Never helpful, never polite. Ruth waited patiently. No rush, and she felt sorry for the woman. The return trip was completely empty. Ruth considered cutting her shift short. Nobody was riding anyway, but conscience wouldn't allow it. Anyone might need the bus. She knew too well how it felt to miss the last ride and have to walk across the city. Approaching the depot near the old cemetery, she noticed a solitary figure at a stop. A passenger, finally, Ruth thought, and slowed down. But the man, in a padded jacket and cap, didn't move. He stood with his back to the road, staring into the distance. "Hey sir," Ruth called, opening the door slightly. "Get on if you're going somewhere. Last trip." The man didn't turn. Ruth shrugged and was about to drive off when she saw it. Around the corner, rattling and sparking on the joints, crawled a trolleybus. Old, worn-out windows shattered, bearing a route number that made Ruth grip the wheel. 13. Route 13 had been cancelled when she was still in school, flashed through her mind, at least 20 years ago. The trolleybus rolled past, and Ruth caught the silhouette of the driver. He sat upright, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead without blinking. The man at the stop suddenly stirred, picked up a bundle from the ground, and ran after the trolleybus, waving his arms. "Stop!" he shouted. "Stop, Nick. Take it." But the trolleybus didn't stop. It turned onto a street leading to the old apartment blocks and disappeared into darkness. Ruth sat frozen, unable to move. Her heart thumped in her throat, palms sweaty. Just tired, she tried to convince herself. Or Sam's been breathing in his homemade brew at the depot again. But curiosity, that cursed trait that always got her into trouble, took over. Ruth turned her trolleybus and followed. The street was empty. Streetlights flickered every other lamp, windows dark in the houses. The neighborhood slept. Ruth drove slowly, peering into the shadows. No trolleybus in sight. "Fool," she muttered to herself. "I imagined it." Then she saw it. The trolleybus stood by an abandoned building at the end of the street. Supposed to be demolished last year, but no money, no equipment. Dark, deserted, windows boarded up. Ruth stopped a little way off and turned off the engine. Silence rang in her ears. The ghost trolleybus stood with its doors open, swaying on its springs as if breathing. No one emerged from the cabin. "Go," Ruth ordered herself. "Leave, now." Instead, she got out of her trolleybus and walked toward the other one. Her legs wobbling, she pushed forward stubbornly. "Curiosity killed the cat," her mother's saying echoed in her mind. The interior was empty, dark. Ruth pulled a lighter from her pocket, thanks to her smoking habit, and shone it around. Seats torn, floor littered with trash and autumn leaves. No one in the driver's seat, but on the dashboard lay a notebook. A simple school notebook in grid paper. Ruth picked it up with trembling hands and opened it. On the first page, neatly written, "Diary of Nicholas S. Polunin, trolleybus driver." Polunin. Ruth's memory supplied the detail. Yes, there had been such a man. He died on Route 13 Her mother used to say, "A good man didn't drink." Ruth flipped through the pages. Ordinary entries. Today drove the scouts to the camp. Engine acting up, needs repair. Zena complaining I'm late again. The last entry dated October 15th, 1965, exactly 20 years ago. Day for day. Today is strange. Petya from the store asked me to deliver the cash. The armoured truck broke down, and the money needed to reach the bank urgently. 3 bags, very heavy. He said management approved, even showed me a note. But I feel uneasy. Put the bags under the seat. We'll deliver in the evening. Just hope Zena doesn't find out. She'll kill me. Okay, last trip, then home. No more entries. Ruth reread the last line. 3 bags of cash, under the seat. She crouched down and shone the lighter under the driver's seat. Empty. Only dust and cobwebs. Looking for something. Ruth jumped, hitting her head on the steering wheel. The man from the stop stood in the doorway. Up close, his padded jacket had burn holes, his face pale as paper. I just... Ruth stepped back. Don't be afraid, the man smiled sadly. I won't touch you. I can't touch anyone. Not for 20 years. You too. A ghost. He nodded. Like Nick, but he didn't survive the accident. And I couldn't either. Found out someone died because of me. He sat on one of the torn seats, holding the bundle to his chest. I was asked to deliver the money. Lied that management allowed it. Wanted to earn a little. My daughter was sick, medicine expensive. Made a deal with friends. They'd take the cash, we'd split. And Nick didn't make it. On the turn near the cemetery, the wire snapped. He got electrocuted. Bus into the ditch, he dead. And the money, never found. Maybe your friends took it. The man shook his head. Too slow. Police came fast. Checked everything. No money. Nick's body checked at the morgue. Bus dismantled piece by piece. Gone. But I know. He hid it somewhere. Felt something was wrong. Hid it. But where? Ruth thought. Polunin wrote he put the bags under the seat. But it was empty. That meant... What if he didn't hide them in his trolley bus? She said slowly. What if he moved them along the route? The man stiffened. But where? He had a route. Where was the end of Route 13? Old depot. Later turned into garages. Ruth remembered. The old depot was right behind the cemetery. There was an abandoned well for technical water. It had been filled in later, but back then... Let's go, she said decisively. I think I know where your money is. They walked through dark streets, a living woman and a ghost. Ruth imagined how strange they must have looked from the outside. Luckily, they met no one. Near the old garages, Ruth stopped. She remembered the well. Her father had told her about it. As a child, they had gone there to catch frogs. The freshly disturbed soil was covered in grass slightly greener than the surroundings. Here, she said. He could have stopped, pretending to check the water and drop the bags in the well, planned to return and retrieve them. The man knelt and tried to sift through the soil with his ghostly hands. Help, he pleaded. Please. Ruth spotted a broken plank and began digging. The ground was soft, settled. Half an hour later, she hit something solid. The first bag was almost rotten, but the money inside was intact. Old Soviet notes, yellowed and sticking together. Then the second and the third. The man stared at the bags, crying. Ghostly tears rolled down his pale cheeks. 20 years, he whispered. 20 years I've followed him every night. He drives his last route and cannot stop. And I run and cannot catch up. Every night. Except this one. He looked at Ruth. Thank you. Now it can be returned. Now he is free, and I am too. The man began to dissolve, becoming transparent. The last thing Ruth saw was his smile, the first true smile in 20 years. In the morning, Ruth took the bags to the police. They questioned her thoroughly. What could she say? That a ghost trolley bus led her to a treasure. In the end, she said she found it while digging for worms to fish with. The money was returned to the state. The shortage resolved. Ruth even received a small bonus, enough for potatoes. And Route 13 was never seen again. Ruth purposely drove past the cemetery several times on night shifts. Nothing. Only once, on the anniversary, she thought she saw two figures at the stop, the driver in uniform and the man in the padded jacket. They stood, talking peacefully. When she approached, no one was there. Only two yellowed trolleybus tickets on the bench. Ruth kept them as a keepsake. One for Route 7, one for 13. Both dated October 15th, 1965. Since then, she carries them in her wallet, like a talisman. And when young drivers complain about how hard the job is, how big the responsibility, she just smiles. They don't know the real responsibility, to deliver a passenger to the final stop, even if it means returning from the afterlife. And Ruth knows one thing for certain: duty. It never lets go, not for 20 years, not even after death. An old bus driver once told me this story. His name was Frank Donovan. He'd spent nearly 40 years driving a winter highway between small northern towns in Minnesota. We were drinking tea at a vehicle inspection station when he suddenly said, "There was one route. After that, I slept with the lights on for a whole month." It was a December blizzard. The road was buried so deep the bus felt like it was moving through a tunnel of snow. We approached an abandoned bus stop called Devil's Marsh. No houses, no people. Nothing for at least 20 miles. But according to regulations, you still had to stop. And just as I hit the brakes, I saw her. A woman, tall, wearing an old dark blue coat, a knitted shawl, her hair completely hidden. Her face was pale, like it had been dusted with flour. She stood beneath a streetlight that hadn't worked in at least 10 years. The passengers exchanged glances, but the woman stepped inside, silently, and took a seat by the window. "Heading into town?" I asked. She nodded. But here's the strange part. The snow on her never melted. It wasn't snow at all. It looked more like ash or powder. We drove on. The bus grew quiet, unnaturally quiet. Then a girl, maybe 12 years old, sitting across from her, tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, she's breathing. The wrong way." The mother dropped her gloves. I checked the mirror. The woman sat still, staring out the window, and the glass in front of her wasn't fogging up. Then the bus stalled, dead, on a perfectly clear stretch of road. I turned around to tell everyone I'd step outside and check. And the seat where the woman had been sitting was empty. The passengers started shouting. Someone said she must have gotten off, but the doors had never opened. When we finally reached the city, the mechanics found something on the floor of the bus. Wet footprints, bare feet. They led from her seat straight up to the ceiling, as if she had simply walked upward. After that, no one ever boarded a bus at night near Devil's Marsh. I was already thinking about quitting long-haul driving, health, family. You know how it goes. Then dispatch called. One urgent job. Nobody wanted to take it. The cargo was sealed crates. Destination, Polar Station T-17. I asked, "Where the hell is that?" Dispatch went quiet for a second, then said, "It's not on the map, but we've got coordinates. The GPS will guide you. Triple pay." So I figured, fine. One last run. The road cut straight through the tundra. Polar night. The kind of darkness where your headlights feel like they're sinking into cotton. After 100 miles, there was nothing. No towns, no lights, no radio signal. Just the wind howling and the faint glow of crashed drones somewhere on the horizon. Then the dashboard flashed. GPS signal lost. And suddenly, the navigator turned itself on. A calm female voice said, "Continue straight. Do not turn, under any circumstances." I thought it was a glitch. But the farther I drove, the stranger things got. A thick fog rolled in, heavy, milky. The road beneath my wheels began to glow faint green, like something was lighting it from below. Then I saw a bridge ahead, long, metallic, suspended over a deep ravine, even though the map showed flat land. At the entrance, a rusted sign read, "Restricted area, closed since 1984. But the road led straight onto it. No detours, no turns. The navigator repeated calmly, "Continue straight." So I did. Halfway across the bridge, the truck started shaking, like the wheels weren't on steel, but on ice. Then came a flash, white light, silence, and suddenly, I wasn't on the bridge anymore. I stood on a massive concrete platform, the kind used at military airfields, no snow. The air hummed like a giant engine was running underground. A man stepped out of the darkness, wearing an old Soviet-style field jacket, no flashlight, no hat. His face was pale as snow. "You're late," he said. "You were supposed to arrive back in '84. "Arrive where?" I asked. "T-17. Did you bring the cargo?" "I did," he nodded. "Then leave, while you still can." I climbed into the cab and turned the key. The engine wouldn't start. I looked in the mirror. The trailer was gone. Just the cab. And a road fading into nothingness. I jumped out. No tire tracks, no footprints. Only a black shadow on the ground where the truck had been, like something burned into the concrete. Then the radio crackled. A whisper came through. "Thank you for bringing us home." The wind turned warm. I got back into the cab. The engine started by itself. I woke up at dawn on a highway between Salakard and Vorkuta. The dashboard clock read 3 o'clock, November 17th, 1984. My phone calendar said 2025. Later, other drivers told me that T-17 was an old radiation monitoring station, shut down after an accident in '84. Back then, they really were hauling equipment out there. The truck disappeared. The driver was never found. I don't drive anymore. But sometimes, late at night, if you tune your CB radio to 27.125 megahertz, through the static you can still hear, "Continue straight, do not turn, under any circumstances." And then, very quietly, from far away, "This isn't a road, it's a bridge between worlds, and we were the cargo you delivered." I heard this story from a truck driver named Mike. Everyone called him Gray. He wasn't the kind of guy who talked much. A veteran long-haul driver, calm, quiet. But his eyes looked like someone who had seen something a person was never meant to see. We were parked at a rest stop in rural Ohio. late at night. The wind dragged plastic bags across the asphalt, and his cab smelled of strong coffee and diesel fuel. He stared ahead and said, "You ever believe there are nights when the road is alive?" Then he told me. It happened on Halloween night, about 3 years ago. Mike was hauling auto parts from Columbus to Pittsburgh. Legit cargo, no shortcuts. He left late, planning to arrive by morning. The sky was clear. The highway was empty. The moon hung low like a street lamp over the road. The radio crackled, playing some old country song. Then he saw her, standing on the shoulder. A woman, tall, long dark coat. She raised her hand. Mike thought, "It's Halloween, probably drunk. I'll give her a ride to the next gas station." He stopped. She got in without a word, didn't look at him. And she smelled strange, like cold metal, like blood on steel. "Where to?" he asked. "The old church," she said. Her voice was low, distorted, like static on a radio. They drove in silence. Then the radio hissed, changed stations by itself, and instead of music, children laughing. Not happy laughter, more like someone laughing right next to your ear. Mike turned the volume down. That's when she spoke again. "You missed the turn." He checked the GPS. There was no turn there, but his headlights revealed a narrow road, out of nowhere, gravel, deep ruts, overgrown. "Here," she said. He turned. The road sloped downward. Fog rolled in thick, like it could be cut with a knife. Then everything stopped. No engine noise, no radio, no wind, just his heartbeat. He looked over. The seat was empty. She was gone. The door was still closed. Then the headlights caught something in the fog. An old church, no steeple, the cross leaning sideways, a sign on the gate read, "Cemetery closed since 1972. Mike doesn't remember turning around. He just slammed the gas and drove. When he hit the highway again, the road behind him was gone, like it never existed. On the dashboard, there was a handprint, black, like soot. It wouldn't wash off, not with gas, not with solvent. "Since then," he said quietly, "I don't drive on Halloween. If the load is urgent, they can wait. Because that night, the road isn't just for the living.